I am so proud to be here alongside so many advocates and leaders as we continue our push to protect IVF access, including Resolve President and CEO Barbara Calora, SRM Board Member Dr. Steve Spandorfer, Dr. Amanda Adelier, Illinois-based reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist, all of the IVF parents here today to share their stories, and my partners in this very important legislation, Senators Murray, Booker, and of course, Leader Schumer. The ruling from Alabama Supreme Court that effectively labeled women who undergo IVF as criminals and our doctors as killers proved that we were right to be worried about after the Supreme Court threw out Roe v. Wade. After that ruling, I received letters from folks across the country whose lives were thrown into chaos. I read about service members anxious that they might get transferred to a base in a red state, a decision that would be out of their control, but might force them to choose between their service to our nation and their hopes for a family. And by the way, happy Women in Military Service Day. Today, by the way, Women Veterans Day, yep. I heard from a woman suffering from endometriosis who needed IVF to conceive and who was outraged that a majority male court, whose members might not even be able to tell you a single symptom of her disease, were trying to stop others like her from becoming moms. And I thought about my own experience. After a decade post-combat of struggling with infertility, I was only able to have my two beautiful, silly little girls through the miracle of IVF. Look, my battle with infertility was one of the most heartbreaking struggles of my life. My miscarriage more painful than any wound I earned in Iraq. So excuse me if I took it personally when the same Republicans who rely on NRA blood money to get elected suggested that women like me are committing acts akin to murder, when all we're trying to do is create life and not to have to suffer through more miscarriages. After the Alabama ruling, I went to the Senate floor and begged my GOP colleagues to help pass my bill to enshrine into law the simple standard that no doctor or hopeful parent could be criminalized for IVF. Despite claiming to support IVF, Republicans blocked it. What we experienced last month from Republicans, though, may have been the most cynical of all. Senators Cruz and Senator Britt introduced their so-called IVF Protection Act, complete misnomer, a bill that would absolutely do nothing to protect access to IVF. It does nothing to stop states from using all of the workarounds that don't literally, but effectively, ban IVF, doing absolutely nothing to address the uptick in embryonic personhood bills across the country. Instead, their bill decrees that states that ban IVF would be blocked from getting federal Medicaid funding, which, by the way, states under Republican control that are most likely to ban IVF are the very same states that have been working to gut Medicaid for years. Calling your bill the IVF Protection Act without doing anything to protect IVF is despicable. It is akin to an arsonist selling you fire insurance that doesn't cover arson. If Republicans really want to support IVF like they claim, and they're campaigning on, they'll help pass our Right to IVF Act tomorrow. Our pro-family, pro-freedom bill would protect access to IVF, expand IVF coverage for veterans, and make it easier to afford fertility care. These are real solutions that would help tens of thousands of Americans every year build the families of their dreams. My Republican colleagues, I tell you, it should be simple. If you support IVF, then support our Right to IVF Act. Thank you. And now I think I'm going to go to Senator Booker. Thank you.
First of all, I want to celebrate Senator Duckworth, who's been a champion on this issue time and time again, taking her personal efforts to make sure that we as a nation have laws and legislation that give the dream for her family, to make it a dream for everyone. I want to say right now very clearly that we as a nation have to stand up right now to secure the basic rights. This bill is about three things that are obvious. It is about protecting rights, expanding opportunity, and supporting our military service people. It's about protecting rights because we know right now fundamentally that fundamental reproductive rights are under attack in the United States of America. Alabama is showing us the future that people want to pull us to, where women and families do not have the right to make their own reproductive decisions. We see an assault by extremist right-wing judges that are trying to take away what the overwhelming majority of Americans want, to have basic reproductive freedoms. This is an existential moment in our nation because whether you're Republican or Democrat, IVF is fundamentally supported across the nation. I believe that we have to secure these rights, and that you see a small amount of people trying to exercise and impose their will over the will of Americans across the spectrum. Number two, we want to expand opportunity. The dream of having a family, the hope that so many couples have, should not be limited because of their bank account. We know in this country that there are too many people, because they don't have health insurance that covers IVF treatments, that get denied the opportunity to have a family. And so I fundamentally believe we need to begin to expand this kind of miraculous treatment to more people. I am so excited that we have a bill that will push and have private insurers cover IVF treatment. And then finally, our military families. These are folks that make the greatest sacrifices for our country. They should not have to choose between military service and having a family. They should not be put in a position where their service, exposure to chemicals or to military injuries, should deny them the right that other families have. We should stand up for our military men and women so that their traditions and their values, so sacred and vital to our country's success, should be passed on for generations to come. And so today I am celebrating, because we know we don't just stand here in the shadow of the Capitol in a way that we are speaking to a small interest group. This is America. This is what should be fundamental to our rights, fundamental to our ideals of opportunity, and fundamental to our commitment to our servicemen and women. And so I want to thank all the activists. We are on the right side of history. I want to thank all the activists who know that this assault by extreme right-wing judges on the reproductive freedoms and choices of families must stop. We need this national legislation, and I am so grateful, not just for the champions that are in the Congress and in the Senate. I'm thankful for the champions that are here. I got to shake hands with people, but I meet them all over my state. Families that tell me the most personal stories about their struggles, about their pain, but ultimately about the fruition they get when they get access to IVF treatment. People who celebrate the fact that they have been able to access their hopes and dreams in beautiful children. This should be something in our country that is standard, that is expansive, that has opportunity and security, and ultimately the support of Congress. Thank you very much. And I now want to bring up a champion when it comes to reproductive rights and IVF, Senator Murray.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to all of our speakers today. This is so critical. You know, we saw last week that despite the fact that there are Republican bills right now that would jeopardize birth control, Republicans were unwilling to vote to protect contraception. This week, we are going to see where they stand on IVF. As each of us has made clear, the threat to IVF is not hypothetical. We already saw the chaos and heartbreak caused when the Alabama Supreme Court upended IVF access. Women who were days away from appointments they had waited months for and spent thousands of dollars on had their treatment canceled and their dreams of motherhood thrown into uncertainty. This already happened. It was national news. It was complete chaos. So Republican efforts to dismiss this vote as fear-mongering are simply not going to fly. Today, the threat is not gone because the Life at Conception Act, supported by a majority of House Republicans, would make fetal personhood the law of the land and take the crisis that we saw in Alabama nationwide. Meanwhile, Republicans' bill to allegedly protect IVF wouldn't do anything to stop these attacks. In fact, it explicitly allows states to enact restrictions and burdensome requirements that would force IVF clinics to close their doors. That bill is nothing but a PR stunt, providing cover for Republicans to keep somehow pretending they're not going to control women's bodies. Now, the good news is if Republicans really, truly, and honestly want to protect IVF in a meaningful way, we have a bill, Democrats, to do just that. The Right to IVF Act protects the right to IVF. It lowers IVF costs for families, including our service members and veterans who should never have to sacrifice their ability to start their families. Tomorrow, we're going to hold a Senate vote on the right to IVF for all the American public to see. Every senator will be put on the record as to whether they are serious about supporting IVF, serious about preventing more chaos like we saw in Alabama, and serious about standing with the 1 in 7 women who need to turn to care like IVF to grow their families. So don't let Republicans fool you. Their top political leaders, including the Speaker of the House, continue to support legislation that would give an embryo the exact same rights as a living, breathing human being. They know that that is at total odds with IVF, and they do not care. They just want the American people to forget that inconvenient truth until after November, and we're not going to let them. Senate Democrats are going to protect your right to IVF, and we will protect all reproductive health care for women in this country. Thank you all so much for standing with us in this critical battle. And with that, I'm proud to introduce to you Jamie Hurd.
Jamie,
Thank you so much. Really appreciate what you've done.
My name is Jamie Hurd, and I'm an infertility patient from Birmingham, Alabama. After being diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome and a pituitary tumor, my husband and I were not quite prepared for what the journey to parenthood would look like. We could not afford the out-of-pocket costs of the medical treatment that my doctor deemed necessary for me to get pregnant. Tough conversations were had for the possibility that we would not be able to have our own biological kids, a conversation that I never expected to have as I grew up with dreams of having my own large family. After losing my mother to cancer and the death of my only sibling, the realization is that now it's up to me to carry that bloodline forward, a heavy weight that I now carry along with the challenges of infertility. Fortunately for my husband and I, my employer expanded its health insurance to cover infertility treatments, including in vitro fertilization. It was the answer to our prayers, and it also made that weight feel a little lighter, because although with infertility, it can be definitely emotionally and physically trauma, it also gave us hope for having a family. We were blessed with our son through our first IVF cycle. If we didn't have the insurance coverage, we wouldn't have the family we have today. We were excited to start the IVF process again in February of this year to grow our family and give our son a sibling. Days later, news broke that the Alabama Supreme Court would classify embryos as children. Our clinic released a statement advising the pause of IVF treatments due to the legal risk. While the governor of Alabama signed a bill meant to protect IVF clinics so that treatments could resume, it is just a band-aid to the shattering Supreme Court decision. I'm not responsible or to blame for my infertility diagnosis, but I am responsible for ensuring that I make the appropriate decisions with my healthcare provider regarding my body and my ability to grow my family. And while my journey is engulfed with much grief, I believe there's purpose in my journey and the seasons I've endured. Those seasons have given me the strength to stand before you today on behalf of the 1 in 6 experiencing infertility, to share my story and spread awareness for our need for protected and unbound access to health care to treat our infertility. And so we're counting on Congress to help protect the access to IVF so that we can still have the ability to expand our families. Thank you.
Next is Julie Eshelman. There you are.
Hi, thank you. My name is Julie Eshelman. I am a military spouse, and I am an IVF patient. Over the last 8 years, my husband and I have sacrificed far more than the average military family and far more than most civilian families can imagine. We have lived in Arizona, Illinois, Kansas, Washington, and Pennsylvania. We are approaching our 5th move in 7 years this summer to Virginia, and on average, we've only spent 11 to 24 months at each of those locations. Due to my husband's military service, we start all over again each time we move with new doctors. And for routine health care, that is something that we've come to accept. But once we were diagnosed with infertility, it became a huge hurdle and brought additional delays to building our family. Each move added, on average, an additional 9 months of delays while we waited for referrals and wait lists at those fertility clinics. Those are on top of the delays in our family building plans due to deployments and training missions that took my husband away for weeks, months, and even a year at a time. For years, we saved every penny we could because we knew that fertility treatments like IUI and IVF and the medications required for those fertility treatments were not covered by TRICARE, the insurance plan for military families. Living far away from our family and friends and lacking a local support system through our struggles, we still gave up trips to visit our family so we could afford to build ours. We gave up vacations, having a second car, and so much more. Essentially, we gave up everything because we desperately wanted to have a family of our own. Some of those choices cost us friendships and strained our family relationships because the financial burden of paying for fertility treatments that TRICARE did not cover. While IVF gave me my beautiful daughter, our family isn't complete. We are emotionally and physically still recovering from our second trimester loss in January. The devastating effects of the decision in Alabama has added to this wild roller coaster. As someone who has experienced 4 pregnancy losses, one while we were driving across the country during a military move, and one that nearly killed me in January, I fear for what might happen if I experienced a miscarriage or complications during my next pregnancy. My medical and family building decisions now have to take into account what is happening politically in the states where the military sends my family. I even wonder if IVF would be legal in our next state once we are able to establish care. This is why I'm so grateful to Senators Duckworth, Murray, and Booker, who have proposed the Right to IVF Act. This is the only bill that Resolve has endorsed because it's comprehensive enough to meet the needs of families like mine. I urge Congress to pass this legislation and make family building easier for military families like mine and for all Americans. Thank you.
Good morning. First, thank you to my senator, Senator Duckworth, and to Senator Murray and Senator Booker and Leader Schumer for their leadership on this really important set of legislation. And really, thank you to Julie and to Jamie for sharing your stories. I'm Dr. Amanda Adelier. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist, so that's REI for short. I'm the founder and medical director of CCRM Chicago, and I'm an expert in fertility care, and that includes IVF. And that's why I'm here today, because I've been so disturbed by the threats to the work that I do, to my patients, and to my future patients. I'm fortunate enough to live in Illinois. I don't wake up in the morning wondering if my state courts or legislature are going to intervene in the care that I give to my patients. But unfortunately, my colleagues around the country don't have that luxury. Some of them are standing behind me today. About 4 years ago, I had a patient walk in my office. She had just been married and just diagnosed with breast cancer and was devastated. Her medical oncologist recommended a chemotherapy that, while it would save her life and treat her breast cancer, would also likely destroy her ovaries and her chance of having genetically related children. And so she and her husband wanted to preserve their fertility. I helped them with an IVF cycle, and they froze embryos. She went off, she had her treatment, and I didn't see her for a couple years. But about 1.5 years ago, she came back. She was in remission, she was healthy, and she was ready to have a family. And when I tell you that was one of the best days of my career, I mean, I cried tears of joy with my patient. And I think having the right and the access to IVF, having the ability to freeze embryos that she may never have used, having the financial coverage to be able to afford this care. That was all critical to her being able to build her family. Those are all things that could be taken away. And now I think about, gosh, had she lived in Alabama, had she been like Jamie, it would have been over for her. And what I think sometimes we don't realize is that for people with fertility issues, time is of the essence. They don't have time. The time is now. And so I love the Right to IVF Act because it really is going to ensure that patients with fertility issues and their physicians who are experts in this care can provide the care that is needed, not politicians, not bureaucrats, not judges. You know, it also is something I think about a lot that, you know, as REI doctors, along with all the folks behind me, we've all seen this. You get patients who come into your office and you create this complex plan, it includes IVF, and then you find out they can't afford it. They don't have insurance coverage and the care is unaffordable. And these patients want so badly to be parents. And some of them leave the office and they never come back. They don't ever become parents. And that is an injustice. I love this act because not only does it protect IVF care, it's going to also expand coverage for our federal employees that we all rely upon, that we should all be serving. That means soldiers, sailors, park rangers, postmen, everyone. And when I tell you infertility can affect anybody, I mean it. And so we should all be in support of IVF care. We should all be in support of protecting the right to IVF. And so I'm asking all U.S. senators to support this legislation, protect my patients, protect their futures. Let us all become parents who want to be. Thank you. I'm going to hand it on to Louisa.
Good morning. My name is Luisa Lopez, and I am a New York City social worker and IVF patient. After a decade of enduring heartbreak and financial strain, my husband and I finally welcomed our miracle baby, Lucas Sebastian, last October. My family building journey has involved 8 grueling IVF cycles and 2 miscarriages, each filled with emotional pain and the stigma surrounding the IVF in our community. IVF treatments are incredibly costly, and we faced significant financial challenges, staying in less than ideal jobs just to afford treatments. The emotional toll of repeated cycles and miscarriages was immense, and yet we remained steadfast in our dream of becoming parents. I am here today to support the Right to IVF bills. This crucial legislation is going to establish a nationwide right for patients to access IVF and other assisted reproductive technologies. By establishing this right, this bill would preempt any state from efforts to limit such access from families like ours, ensuring that no hopeful parent or their doctors are punished for trying to start or grow a family. This will alleviate the financial and emotional burdens that we have gone through on families like mine, who have struggled immensely to afford the necessary treatments. My experiences highlight the urgent need for accessible and affordable IVF for all families, and I passionately support the Right to IVF Act because it will ensure that all families have the chance to pursue IVF if they need to, without overwhelming financial barriers. Money should not be a determining factor in anyone's family building journey. I urge lawmakers to pass the Right to IVF Act and support countless families like ours who are struggling to conceive. By making IVF accessible and affordable, they can help alleviate the emotional and financial strains on families and enable them to achieve their dreams of parenthood. Thank you, Senators Duckworth, Senator Murray, Senator Booker, and Senator Schumer for your leadership on this issue. Families like ours are incredibly grateful, and we hope that the senators do the right thing tomorrow. Thank you.
We're able to take some Q&A. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Senator Duckworth. It seems like Republicans are at least somewhat interested in protecting IVF nationwide. So do you see an avenue for you and Senator Booker to work with maybe Senator Britt on some sort of bipartisan legislation here?
Well, they're welcome to join ours and make it bipartisan. We've got 47 co-sponsors thus far, and it's a very simple piece of legislation. I can't see why they wouldn't join it. In contrast, 90% of Republicans have not signed on to Senator Britt's bill.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Clearly this is a personal issue for you. Are you concerned at all by having this vote this week that this becomes politically entrenched in any way?
Well, Republicans have made this a political issue already, and so we can end this right now by them voting yes on this bill.
Yes.
We have time for one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. What conversations have you had, if any, with Republicans about how they intend to vote on this bill tomorrow?
It's been crickets. We've invited them to join our piece of legislation, and some of it is, especially Senator Murray's portion about coverage for military families makes sense, and many of them have said to me in the past that they would support coverage for veterans and active duty military. I don't think anybody could be opposed to making IVF more affordable. Your bill makes it affordable so that you shouldn't be blocked out from being able to start a family because of your socioeconomic status. But again, Republicans know that a vast majority of Americans support access to reproductive technologies, and in particular IVF, and they're running away from this issue.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we can't make this seem like a left-right issue. It's absolutely not. This is an issue that's overwhelmingly supported in America by Republican families, Democratic families, and independent families. And so trying to make this into some kind of typical political debate in Washington is just wrong. It's about protecting fundamental rights, expanding opportunity, and taking care of our military families, something that the majority of Americans support.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.